Welcome back. I'm still Jim Brock. I'm still part of BMT Consulting. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the planning phase. Um, the single most process intensive phase in the entire project lifecycle. If you've been studying for the PMP test using Rita Mulcahy's Learning Solutions exam prep book, you will know that planning is where a significant portion of the exam questions originate. Of the 49 PMBOK processes, 24, which is nearly half, belong to the planning process groups. So we're going to cover every one of those today. Um, and they're definitely going to be grounded in the RMC and PMI mindsets, which are proactive, thoughtful, and thorough planning, which would be the hallmark of a professional project manager. So let's go ahead and get started here. Here's what we'll cover today. We're going to begin by placing the planning phase in context with the full project lifecycle, so you know exactly where we are and why the sequence matters. Then we'll move through the major planning knowledge areas of scope, schedule, cost, quality, resource, communications, risk, procurement, and stakeholder engagement. We'll close with a look at how baselines are established and the plan is formally approved, the moment that officially transitions the project from planning to execution. So Rita Mulcahy says that she structures planning by process groups and knowledge area using the PMP process chart. I highly recommend reviewing that chart in Chapter 3 of your RMC book alongside today's slides. They are designed to complement each other. So let's go ahead and get rolling. So in a predictive, aka waterfall environment, every project moves through 5 phases: initiation, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So we are here today in phase 2, which is planning. So you're going to notice 2 things on the diagram. First, the marker that shows that we're here and we're going to be talking about planning. The second is monitoring and controlling has a note that it runs concurrently across all the phases. This is a common exam trick. Many students think monitoring and controlling is sequential. It is not. It does overlap every other phase, and PMI expects you to know that. In terms of process count, planning dominates that with 24 of those 49 PMBOK processes right here in planning. So no other process group comes even close to having that much information. From Chapter 3, if you plan properly, executing, monitoring, and controlling and closing your project will be easier. Invest time in planning. It always pays off. Now let's talk about why planning is not optional. There's 5 compelling reasons. The first one being it sets the baseline. The planning process produces 3 formally approved baselines: the scope, schedule, and cost. These baselines are the measuring stick for all project performance. Without them, you have nothing to measure against. Item number 2, it reduces risk and rework. Industry research consistently shows that every dollar invested in planning saves between $10 and $100 in rework. Planning is the cheapest change control you will ever do. Aligning stakeholders. Planning forces conversations. It surfaces conflicts between what different stakeholders want before execution begins. This is when changes are cheap. After execution starts, changes become more expensive. It enables change control. You cannot formally control what you have in baseline. Change control only works when there is a documented plan to compare changes against. The last is RMC's principle. Rita's book is explicit. Plans are meant to be changed, but only through formal change control. Planning is iterative and progressive. The plan evolves, but all changes are controlled. It's important to note here that a lot of people think that when you're talking about predictive, that it is not incremental or it is not, it doesn't like change. That is true. We really don't want a lot of change in a plan-driven project, but a lot of your plan-driven projects are long-term projects. So can you effectively plan all the way out over a 5-year project? No, you can't do that. So what you do is you do rolling wave planning, which means you plan that first phase or the first milestone. You plan in detail everything that's going to happen up to that first milestone. The rest of the milestones in your overall plan are going to be planned from a very high level. Just, hey, these are the major dates, these are the major things that we're going to do. And then as you learn while you're doing that first milestone, what happens there is you're progressively elaborating on what you've already learned, and then you're going to apply that knowledge to the next phase in your planning process when you start to plan that next phase. So that is kind of a quick wrap up of what rolling wave planning and progressive elaboration are. So indeed, predictive projects are iterative, especially if they're ones that are going to happen over a long period of time. You're going to rolling wave plan your way through that. RMC also repeatedly emphasizes that the project manager does not plan alone. The team plans. Estimates created by people doing the work are more accurate and create more buy-in than in a top-down estimate situation that comes from management. The project management plan is the primary output of the planning phase. PMBOK defines it as the document that describes how the project will be executed, monitored, and controlled and closed. It has 3 components. There's 10 subsidiary plans, one for each knowledge area that planning needs to happen in. Each subsidiary plan defines how the PM will manage that specific area. There's 3 baselines. These are scope, schedule, and cost. Once approved, they can only change through a formal change control process. And then there's other components like change management plan, configuration management plan, requirements management plan, things like that. Now, there's some key PMP facts that you need to be aware of. PMP, or the PM, creates the project management plan with the team, never alone. Okay, you're going to have input for that. The plan must be formally approved before execution begins. The plan is the contract between the PM and the sponsor. Progressive elaboration implies the plan becomes more detailed as the project progresses, and that's what we were talking about before. The PM's primary job is integration, and that's making sure all the plans work together as one cohesive document. And that's the other thing too, is there's plenty of people who think that the project management plan is actually just one plan. It's not. It's kind of the overarching document that all the rest of these are part of. But you have all those subsidiary plans and your 3 baselines that are part of that project management plan. And that includes your integration management plan, which is how you make all of those plans work together. So there are key trap questions on the test that you'll see. So who creates the project management plan? The answer here is the project manager with team input, not senior management and not sponsor alone. Project scope management covers 4 planning processes. Let's walk through those real quick. 5.1 is plan scope management, and this creates the scope management plan, which is the document that defines how scope will be defined, validated, and controlled throughout the project. It also creates the requirements management plan. Process 5.2 is collect requirements, and this documents what stakeholders need from the project. Key tools from RMC Chapter 5. You're going to use things like interviews, one-on-one with stakeholders, focus groups, which would be like facilitated sessions, surveys and questionnaires for large groups, or prototypes, which would be like early models to collect feedback, and benchmarking, which is comparing against industry standards. The requirements traceability matrix links the requirements to the business objectives and ensures nothing gets lost. And then 5.3, that's define scope, and that creates the project scope statement. This is the detailed narrative of what the project will and will not deliver. It includes deliverables, assumptions, constraints, acceptance criteria, and exclusions. What is explicitly out of scope as well. All right. 5.4 is create the work breakdown structure. That decomposes the total project scope into manageable work packages. The WBS is not a list of activities. It's a hierarchical decomposition of deliverables. So RMC's 100% rule is the WBS must capture 100% of the project work. Work not in the WBS is not in the project. This is a fundamental PMI principle that appears on virtually every PMP exam. Scope baseline, what makes up the scope baseline is your scope statements plus your work breakdown structure plus the WBS dictionary, combined approved documents. Okay. Schedule management has 5 planning processes in sequence. Each builds on the previous one. So 6.1 is plan schedule management. It creates the schedule management plan, which again defines the schedule methodology. Are you using agile? Are you using hybrid? Whatever it is that you're going to be doing. And the tools to be used. So define activities is 6.2, and that takes the WBS work packages and decomposes them further into specific scheduled activities. The output here is your activity list and your milestones list from 6.2. 6.3 is to sequence those activities, and that establishes the logical order of the activities using the precedence diagramming method, or PDM. There are 4 relationship types that you will run into when you're doing those network diagramming, when you're doing that network diagramming or precedence diagramming. You have finish to start. That's most common. B can't start until A finishes. You also have start to start, where B can't start until A starts. You have finish to finish, which is B can't finish until A finishes. And then you have start to finish, which is very rare, which is B can't finish until A starts. All right. 6.4 estimate. 6.4 is estimate activity durations. There are three key techniques used from RMC's Chapter 6. There's analogous estimating, which is based on similar and past products, fast but less accurate. There's parametric estimating, which uses statistical relationships. There's 3-point estimating, or PERT, which is the most common one that you're going to deal with. And usually on the test, if you're asked to do a 3-point estimation, they are talking about PERT, unless they actually talk about triangular distribution, and then you would not use the PERT model, which is optimistic plus most likely plus pessimistic. But in PERT, it's optimistic plus 4 times most likely plus pessimistic divided by 6. That formula is the weighted formula for your 3-point estimating, and it is most accurate. Finally, you got 6.5, which is develop schedule. That's where you analyze everything to produce the schedule model. Excuse me, I have a hard time talking today. Your key output of that is the critical path, and you're going to use the critical path method. Chapter 6 in RMC's book is all about the critical path method. The critical path is the longest path through the network diagram. It is also the path that has 0 float in it. All right. It determines the project's earliest possible completion date, which means the critical path tells you how long the project's going to be. The critical path, you know it's the critical path because it has 0 float in it. All right. And activities on the critical path, like I said, have 0 float. And compressing the schedule, you use float to help you do a schedule compression. And you're going to do things like crashing or fast tracking. And we'll talk more about those later. Here's an exam alert. Know how to calculate early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and total float. These calculations appear frequently on the PMP exam. And I have several tools that will help you do that. I even have an entire network relationship study tool that will help you play around with network diagrams and to calculate float and calculate the critical path. Next, we have cost management. Cost management has 3 processes. 7.1 is plan cost management, which is it creates the cost management plan. It defines how costs will be estimated, budgeted, and controlled. It establishes the units of measurement. So are you using dollars, or is it person hours? what are you doing? The level of precision, so how accurate does it need to be, and your control threshold, which escalate if variance exceeds 10%. All right, so you're going to set those thresholds, and it sets the performance measurement rules, which means how you're going to actually measure that. 7.2, which is estimate cost, produces activity cost estimates for every scheduled activity. You're going to use tools like analogous, which would be top-down estimating based on similar projects. This has low accuracy and it's a low cost. You have parametric, which is you're going to use statistical models, and that's kind of bottom-up estimating for each activity, and they roll up most accurate most of the time. And you also have 3-point, right, which again is like that 3-point estimation or a PERT. So that helps you deal with expected cost of under uncertainty. All right. The basis of estimates document explains the assumptions behind every estimate. That's important to note. Next one is 7.3, which is determine your budget. Here you're going to aggregate all activity cost estimates into the project budget. So your cost baseline equals the time phase budget, the S-curve. Spending starts slow, accelerates mid-project, and then slows again to close. Budget at completion equals total planned cost. There's a critical distinction here that our RMC calls out in Chapter 7. So your cost baseline equals what we plan to spend month by month used for your earned value management measurements. Management reserve is an additional budget held by the organization for unknown unknown unknowns. Contingency reserves are budget that's held by the PM for known risks, which are included in the cost baseline. Your project budget equals your cost baseline plus your management reserve. The PM can use contingency reserves without sponsor approval, but management reserves require sponsor signature sign off. Okay. Next, we'll talk about quality resource and your communication plans. These three knowledge areas are all on the one slide, and it's just there for efficiency. So, we want to make sure we cover all of these. So these three knowledge areas each have one planning process. So for quality management, you have 8.1, which is planned quality management. The key principle here is quality is planned in, not inspected in. Your cost of quality is your total cost of conformance plus non-conformance. Preventing costs, that's training or prevention costs are things like training, design reviews, prevention defects. You have appraisal costs. These are things like testing, inspections, checking for defects. You have internal failure, which is rework discovered before delivery, and you have external failures, which are things like warranty claims, customer complaints. Those are the most expensive. And then here we have to really talk about gold plating, giving the customer more than what was asked for. PMI considers this extremely wrong, and you're definitely going to get some questions on gold plating. It consumes resources without approval, and it actually really introduces risks into the entire plan. Next is the plan resource management. Okay, so that's Chapter 9. This is where you've got things like a RACI matrix or a RACI matrix, depends on how you want to pronounce it. Basically, it's responsibility. Who does the work? Who's accountable? Who owns the outcome? The consult, who provides input and inform. Keep updated, right? Every deliverable should have exactly one accountable person. The team charter defines team values, agreements, and operating rules. RMC's principle here is acquire resources and confirm availability before finalizing the schedule. A schedule built on unavailable resources is unreliable. And here you've got to keep in mind emotional intelligence. RMC emphasizes that effective PMs use EI to build high-performing teams. And a high-performing team is going to be crucial to you going through your project. Lastly, on this slide, we're going to be talking about the communication plans. So the big deal here in Chapter 10 is the communication channels formula, which is a number of people times the number of people minus 1 divided by 2. If the team has 10 people, for example, your channels are, it's going to be 10 times 9 divided by 2, and that's going to equal 45 channels. All right. The communications management plan answers who needs what information, when, in what format, and through what channel. Your RMC statistic here is a project manager spends 90% of their time communicating. Um, so you want to plan accordingly to that. You want to make sure you have a very well detailed communication plan. Now let's talk about risk a little bit. Risk management has 5 planning processes, so we're going to walk through each of those. 11.1 is plan risk management. This creates the risk management plan. It defines how risk identification, analysis, and response will be conducted. It establishes risk categories, probability impact scales, and risk appetite and risk tolerance. So you want to identify in 11.2 the risks. So you produce the risk register, the master document for all project risk. Identification tools that you're going to use to do that are things like brainstorming, your Delphi technique, which are anonymous experts, consensus, which will reduce your groupthink. You're going to do SWOT analysis, which are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You're going to create, you could use checklist analysis, right, which is based on historical information, and you could be doing things like root cause analysis. Everyone on the project can identify risks. This is an iterative, ongoing process. 11.3 is qualitative risk analysis, and this is where you prioritize risks using a probability times impact matrix. It's fast and it's cost effective. So it produces a prioritized list of risks for further analysis. So you're going to group the risks, and then you're going to basically kind of prioritize those risks the way you have them grouped. Then in 11.4, you have quantitative risk analysis. And this is where you're going to assign numerical values to your risk. It's not required on every project, but it's used for complex, high stakes projects. And here you're going to be looking at things like expected monetary value, EMV, which is probability times impact. And you're going to do that in dollars. You're also going to do things like, if you've got the money for it and you have the software, you could do Monte Carlo simulations. And that's a computer module that's going to run thousands of scenarios to help you figure out where all your risks is going to lie and how probable those risks might be to your project. You also have decision tree analysis, and this is another visual tool for evaluating decisions under uncertainty. Now, 11.5, which is the last one here, is your plan risk response. This selects strategies for each significant risk. So threats, you have 2 types. They're either going to be your risk. You have 2 types, excuse me. So it's either going to be a risk or an opportunity. So threats are negative risks, and how you deal with them is you either avoid it, you transfer it, you mitigate it, or you accept it. All right, and that can be either active or passive. And then on the opportunity side, which is the positive risks, you can either exploit it, you can share it, or you can enhance or accept it. After selecting a response, you have to document any residual risk that may come after you've dealt with that and accomplished that response, and or a secondary risk, which could be created by the response itself. So don't forget about residual risks and secondary risks, and understand the difference between the two. So a key principle here from this chapter of the book is risk management is proactive. You manage risk before they become issues. A risk is an uncertain future event. An issue is a risk that is actually has happened or is happening at that particular moment in time. Now let's talk about procurement and stakeholder engagement plans. Those are 2 there. We got 2 more subsidiary plans here to complete the planning picture. That's the final 2 planning knowledge areas. So procurement plan, and the item is 12.1, so it only has 1 task, and that's plan, procure, management. So this is the process that answers, should we make or buy? And if we buy, how are we going to go about buying it? So it's all about that make or buy decision. So you're going to do make or buy analysis, and that's going to consider things like cost, risk, capacity, strategic importance, and intellectual property. You have different contract types, right, from in chapter 12 here as well, and those are going to be heavily tested. So your first contract type, it would be fixed priced, or you'll see it as FP or FFP, which would be fixed firm price. The seller commits to a fixed price. The seller bears the cost risk, and it's best when scope is well defined. Um, you have variation here, which would be fixed price incentive fee, right? So FPIF, that's where the seller can earn a bonus for performance. And another variation you have would be fixed price with economic price adjustments, or FPEPA. Those are long duration contracts. So you have your kind of inflation's kind of built into that. Okay. And then we have your cost reimbursable type of contracts, and this is where the buyer reimburses all allowable costs plus a fee. A buyer bears the cost risk here. The variations to a cost reimbursable contract would be a cost plus fixed fee, so that's CPFF, or a cost plus incentive fee, or CPIF. You also have a cost plus award fee. So that would be CPAF. And those are different ones that you're going to use to help you manage your risk on the cost reimbursable side as the buyer. You also have time and materials, and this is a hybrid, and it's used when the scope is not well defined and the buyer bears some risk. So you're going to kind of share that risk in a time and materials situation. There's certain documents that you got to deal with here as well, and you're going to be dealing with things like RFPs, which are requests for proposal. This is used for complex services where methodology matters. You also have RFQs, which is a request for quotation. That's used for commodity purchase and low price win type things. You also have invitation for bid, or IFB, and that's a formal bidding process where the lowest price wins. Now let's go ahead and talk about stakeholder engagement, which is task 13.2, which is planned stakeholder engagement. This process creates the stakeholder engagement plan. There's 5 engagement levels of stakeholders that you're going to deal with: unaware, resistant, neutral, supportive, or leading. Those are the different engagement levels, right? The important goal for you is to move all key stakeholders to a supportive or a leading level of engagement. The stakeholder engagement plan is confidential because it contains sensitive analysis of your individual's stakeholders. So you don't want to just have that out for everybody, because this is your intel on your stakeholders, and you don't want to offend anybody by information that might be in there. But the information that's in there is going to help you deal with those individuals and how you are going to come up with a plan to help get them to that supportive and or leading type role. Okay. Now we've got to talk about the baselines and the triple constraints. Okay. So at the conclusion of the planning phase, there are 3 baselines that are formally approved by the sponsor, which means they've been signed off on by the sponsor and you as the PM. Together, they form the performance measurement baseline. So those 3, schedule, scope, and cost, equal your performance measurement baseline. Your scope baseline is project scope statement plus WBS dictionaries. That defines what will be delivered. Your schedule baseline is the approved project schedule model. It defines when it will be delivered. And then finally, your cost baseline, which is the time phase budget, or your S curve, and that defines how much it will cost over time. Together, PMB equals your scope baseline plus your schedule baseline plus your cost baseline. Quality is the 4th hidden constraint. If you compress schedule, quality usually suffers. If you cut cost, scope often shrinks. The constraints are independent. You can never change one without impacting the others. So, change control. Once your baselines are approved, any change, no matter how small, must absolutely go through the integrated change control process. The PM protects the baseline. The PM's job is to protect those baselines like a contract. Informal changes are not acceptable in a professional project environment. You don't just make a change because somebody walked up and said, "Hey, I would really like this." Those are not the things that you're going to do. On the bottom of the screen, you're going to see your earned value management formulas. And all of these formulas down here, you need to know what these formulas are. You're not going to actually have to calculate them on the exam, but you need to know what the output of them is. So you need to know how to read that. And I've got a couple of study tools for you, and I have a couple of documents that spell specifically when you would use each one out and how to read the results of it so you can answer the questions appropriately on the test. So for the exam, EVM calculation questions appear frequently on the exam. So you definitely want to have a good, firm understanding of what these guys are. All right, planning process at a glance. So this gives you a complete map of all 24 planning processes organized by knowledge area. So let me call it a few of the important patterns here. Integration, which is task 4.2, is the first planning process. That's develop project management plan is the container that holds all the other plans. Scope 5.1 through 5.4 and schedule 6.1 through 6.5 have the most planning processes, 4 and 5 respectively, because they define the foundation of all other planning. Risk has 5 planning processes, which are 11.1 through 11.5, more than any other single knowledge area. PMI takes risk management very seriously. As a matter of fact, there's an actual risk management certification that you can get. Quality, resource and communications, procurement, and stakeholder engagement each have one planning process. So here's an RMC study tip. The PMP process charts game in RMC, which is in chapter 3, shows all 49 processes organized by the process group and the knowledge area. It's color coded, and the planning row is green, and memorize the process numbers for each area is one of the most effective study strategies. And I've told you before, the best way to answer those questions on the exam is to first determine what type of project environment you're in. Once you've done that, the next step is to figure exactly where you are in the process group's process. Are you in initiating? Are you in planning, execution, monitoring, controlling, or closing? Then go ahead and take a look at the details of the question and what the question's actually asking you. Once you know what type of project, where you're at in the process groups, that's going to help you answer that question. Okay. So exam frequency by knowledge area is as follows. Integration is about 13% of your exam questions. Schedule is about 11%. Risk is 11%. Scope is 10%, and cost is 8%. These 5 areas together represent more than half of all your exam questions. So let's talk about some of the key takeaways here, or how you go about getting the project management plan approved. Sorry, I jumped ahead there on you guys. So creating the project management plan is a collaborative and it's an iterative process. And here's how it works in practice and how PMI expects you to approach it. So step 1 is to you as the PM are going to draft the plan with your team. The PM facilitates this, not dictates it. RMC is explicit about this. The project management plan is created by the project manager with input from the project team. A PM who plans in isolation produces unreliable estimates because they're not the experts on everything and every part of that project. Your team is. Step 2, team reviews and refines. So your SMEs will validate your technical estimations. Scheduled activities are sequenced by the people doing the work. Cost estimates are bottom up. This step is what creates the team buy-in. Step 3 is your stakeholder review. Key stakeholders will review the plan to ensure alignment. Any concerns or conflicts are resolved before formal submission. The plan the sponsor reviews for the first time at approval is a plan that will likely be rejected. So step 4 is sponsor approval and sign off. The sponsor formally approves and signs the project management plan, including all the baselines. This is the moment the plan becomes the official contract between the project and the organization. And then finally is step 5, your project kickoff meeting. The kickoff meeting signals the official transformation or transition from planning to execution. So all key stakeholders should attend. In RMC, as far as they're concerned, the kickoff meeting is part of execution, not planning. It announces that planning is complete and execution is beginning. But according to the process chart groups, kickoff happens in planning. It's like the last thing. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So here are our key takeaways. I'm going to close today with these following 6 things I most want you to remember from today's session. 1, planning is the most process intensive phase. There's 24 of the 49 PMBOK processes. No other phase comes close to having that many processes in it. The project management plan integrates all subsidiary plans and baselines. It's not a collection of separate documents. It is one integrated plan. The 3 baselines form the performance measurement baseline, your PMB. Everything in monitoring and controlling is measured against those 3 baselines. And a big RMC principle here is estimates must be created by the team. Padding estimates is considered dishonest. Gold plating is scope creep in disguise. Okay, so you don't want to deal with padding, and you don't want to deal with gold plating. Just keep those out of your process. Risk management is proactive. Identify and address risks during planning, not after they become issues. The risk register is a living document, not a filing exercise. And number 6, all post-baseline changes go through integrated change control. Informal changes are unacceptable and unprofessional. And the final thought here is from RMC in Chapter 3. The project manager's job is to complete the project within the approved constraints. The only way to do that is to plan thoroughly, communicate constantly, and manage proactively. And that's all we have for you for today. So if you have any questions, go ahead and in this particular case, because this brief has already been done, go ahead and send me an email or make a post in the study group, and I will answer your questions that way. Okay. If for next time, ask your questions, because I will do these sessions live, but we had already did this one and I wasn't able to record it on this project or in this platform. So that's why I went back and re-recorded this. All the ones going forward, we will do live and record as we're having a live session. So thanks for your time. I hope this helps you. Have a good one. See you at the next live session.